The first question is to Bob. Am I surprised? What do you think are the three key things that we here at the conference can do to advocate for reinstatement of the National Corridors Plan?
I don't know if I can mention three, but the National Corridors Plan was never exactly repealed. It just subsided. I noticed that the Department of the Environment of the Commonwealth of Australia gradually migrated the documents across its website until it reached a point where there was a link which said there's a copy of the National Wildlife Corridors Plan in the National Library, which I took to be a bureaucratic way of resisting what was political hostility. So the first thing we've got to do, obviously, is to correct the political hostility, and we've got to get a group of credible people, perhaps these ones here, in contact with the Federal Minister for the Environment to begin the process of really re-educating government about the overwhelming importance of this kind of approach. And one of the things they have to understand is that it is also the cheapest way to do things if you're in the government. All of the activities that have been so eloquently described during this session are really, but from the point of view of government, incredibly cheap. People only want small amounts of money. They want some money for the coordination of groups and programs, and they want a little bit of money to assist with equipment and other resources, but it's trivial compared to what might be spent in most spheres of activity. So, look, I only said one thing, but that's enough.
I think people here can add the other two. Thank you, Bob. Then the next question is to Robin. Are there pathways state and Commonwealth governments can assist farmers to consider regenerative programs?
So there are pathways, and as Bob said, they trade a lot on goodwill, that people get small amounts of money and do amazing work with it. The challenge is that even though it looks like, farmers are making good money, cost of production has gone up, and some farmers are still carrying large debt from the difficult years, and now with increasing frequency of extreme weather events, those debts become more of a concern. So for some farmers it can be difficult to get your eyes up to a level where you can consider doing something differently, because the deforestation that we've seen, a lot of land clearing in Australia is because of government policy. Farmers get the blame, but it's the result of government policy over the years. So it's a long way around saying, yes, there are some pilot programs out there that look very nice. Also, the government departments that implement those programs don't get enough money, so they tend to work with the very large holders where it looks like you get great results. So, but the smaller family farmers don't always have that opportunity to be aware or to enter into these programs. So I think this is a great opportunity for government to decide that food security is important, those who produce food are important, the quality of food is important. So the first thing we need is a food policy, which we don't have. Most high-income countries already have a food policy, so that would be a good start. It's not an answer to your question, and it's a much bigger picture, and I think regeneration, using that language is important in Australia because we've trashed the place so badly. We do need to regenerate. We need to help restore the health. So some pathways, but we need a lot more coordinated action, and we need to have the producers and the environmentalists working together towards that same goal. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. I think that's a starting point. Then pass on to thank you, Robin. Pass on to Liz. So Liz, in your opinion, what are the greatest challenges facing Southeast Queensland environments in the coming decades? Wow. In your opinion as a scientist?
Oh, well, I think I mentioned some of them. People is the biggest problem. I mean, that's number one, right? Whether it's the people moving into Southeast Queensland, whether it's people making decisions about what happens in Southeast Queensland, whether it's people across the world doing things that are contrary to the future of our climate. People are the problem. People are the solution. You know, we're smart enough to get ourselves into this mess. Let's hope we're smart enough to get ourselves out. But so Southeast Queensland, we need. I guess my fear has been a little bit recently. It's just been growing. Is that Southeast Queensland is not seen as the sacrificial part of the corridor, not from a GR perspective, but when we've got 200 plus threatened species, increasing numbers of ecological communities, one of the highest population growths in the region, significant economic and other barriers to conserving nature. I wonder why we're not getting that level of investment. Like, why? It cannot be too difficult, and it means that the whole community has to work together. But that argument that Bob was mentioning before, advocating to the people who make the decisions that this is really important, we care about it, and it's essential not only to our future but to the future of the world in which we depend. So, people. Thank you.
Thank you. People everywhere. So pass it on to Keith. I do have a question for you here. Okay. So given the way your plan certainly changed course over time, you show us that spiral graph in the end. So what are some of the practical realities we can all learn from to manage expectations, our expectations and those of our targeted beneficiaries?
Whoa. Well, to manage expectations.
Yeah, and what have you learned? Because you had that straight line of where you wanted to go, and then it turned spiral and in all directions, which I think is reality.
Yeah. Oh, gee, this is interesting. Well, number one, I think when dealing with others, be they groups or individuals, the fundamental rule is promise small, deliver large. And I hope we've largely kept to that. When I show that summary plan in the West and in discussions with various groups in GLINKS, I generally get an argument that we've actually we've done all the convolutions, but we've ended up doing more than a lot of people expected. But God damn it, we're in the critical decade. I'd keep your expectations high and chase after them as hard as you can.
I guess that's what it is. Thank you. And then Linda, short and sweet question for you. Is there security for your plantings?
Are you talking about, so when we plant, and I think this is what you're talking about, we don't just, planting is the easy bit. It's the maintenance that makes sure that the trees actually continue to grow. So with all the funding that we do, all the grants we go for and everything like that, we're looking at a minimum of 3 years of maintenance, because once the trees get to a certain height, as Alan was saying, you get the canopy cover, you get less weeds, and the trees are basically on their own. So, and then we don't, after that 3 year period, we don't walk away either, because every single one of those 240,000 trees is a baby for me. So we monitor all the plantings we do. We go back, at least once a year, take photos, and if there's any losses and stuff like that, we try to replace the trees, because we've got all our trees are actually funded, so we can do that. But it's a long-term thing for us. So, as I said, once they get past 3 years, then koalas are using them. We've actually had one planting, which I took I4 to, and it was in Grain Foundation, which is Stone and Wood charitable arm, and we did that in August 2019. So it was in the middle of the drought and the fires. And we also did the Eiffel one at Bitterborough at the same time. And there was no rain. And so in October, I thought, I'm not going to let these trees die. We've planted, it was over like almost 5,000 trees. So I sent out an email to our database and I asked for volunteers to help us water those trees. So we had from October to February, I had a roster system set up. And so I had these people, we bought for the one in Bangalow, we bought polypiping and we had hoses all set up on this planting. It was a 1 hectare site. And so we had people coming twice a week from October all the way till February that were planting in the middle of this horrendous drought. And it was so hot and smoky and everything like that. And then the one in Binnaburra, the Eiffel one, they came once a week. We had there was a creek around there, so they were pumping out, and all those trees survived. So we don't just walk away from our plantings and stuff like that. And if you're talking about the security of, if it's sold, the houses are sold, the properties are sold and stuff like that, that is a bit of an issue. But we haven't come across where any of those plantings have been cut down or anything like that. And obviously we pick our landholders that they have got a genuine interest and a long-term interest and a family interest in continuing to have those trees on their property. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Linda. It was anonymous. I don't know the context, but I think what you covered does cover security. Alan has an addition on the same.
Yes, thank you. It's interesting because we've all been tackled by people in the street wanting you to donate to a tree planting program, right? And you wonder what happens. And in our area, we've had a lot of greenwashing of tree planting organisations. There are a lot of them in our area, and they're getting whatever, $1 a tree. There's no way they're going to maintain those to survival or to producing decent biodiversity outcomes. So we've now partnered. We've gone through this process with many of these companies. We're partnering now a trial process with an Environment Trust grant from the government where they are allocating, these are rough numbers, not $1 a tree, but $10 a tree to plant a paddock next to one of our regeneration sites. Now, they're doing that. They're having to work hard to explain to their donors that they want $10 a tree and not $1, but there's science to justify it. And already we've only been going, and as well as that tree planting NGO is contributing $70,000 of cash to our overall project, one-off, in the 3 years which we spend on our natural regen thing. So, and we've already noticed in the last 2 years that we've made that partnership that 3 of the other tree planting people in the area are heading in that direction and looking to allocate more dollars per tree so that they can do the maintenance. So I think we just have to keep educating them.
Thanks, Alan. Keep the mic. You have your own question. So, Alan, how does collaboration work between groups in a region despite having despite having to compete for the same funding? You kind of, yeah.
Oh, I've been writing grants a long time. Yeah, it's competitive. And in New South Wales now, the Environment Trust, which is the main government funding body, they've got layers of we're a trusted mob now, whereas the people we set up last time around the Federal Landcare Group, they're a layer below us, so we get to go for more money than them at the moment. But listen, really, we're happy for the work to be done, and if we miss out next year and they get it, it's all the same. I'll be happy to have a year off.
Can I make a quick comment on that?
Yes.
I mean, the reality that we all work in is that we're continually strongly encouraged to collaborate and integrate and work together and to do it in a competitive funding environment. It's crazy. Crazy.
And I would add to say, I think even for NGOs and most partners here, there is potential for us to compete for money, but I think we've learned over the years that we just need to rally together and be strategic. There's also a few questions for me. I was trying to dodge them. So one quick one, what lessons is I4 learned in Africa that could be valuable for Australia? That's a very wide one, but all I can say is, if not lessons, maybe affirmations that ensuring that indigenous people and local people are part and parcel of the discussion and going beyond just one constituency and continuing to rally together as NGOs, civil society communities to get our policymakers and governments because they can make some shit decision. I think we see that in Africa and often accountability there is less here. So I think there's more potential for you guys to rally together and there's been testimonies of that here. So then there is one for Liz and Robin. Where is it now? Because I like the double-barreled. So it's like from Anonymous, so don't blame me. How do we better engage farmers, landowners in the movement? I think very broad. How can we do it better? Any of you can be number one and just...
How do we engage farmers and landholders? It wasn't just farmers.
Yeah. And landowners, yeah.
Well, I know they've been talking with a few folk recently, particularly, in southeast Queensland, we've got 70% of land managed by private landholders. So in terms of protecting our natural values, cultural values in those landscapes, it's a lot of people to work with. And it's not like out west where we were talking about the scale issue. It's not one landholder managing tens of thousands of hectares. It's tens of thousands of landholders managing 1 or 2 hectares. But it all adds up, and it does create its own challenges. So I guess there's that conversation that we all need to have, as I mentioned before, with the cab driver on the way in here, or with your neighbour who's nuking everything on his block of land, or your local catchment group and the community you live in, or the organisation you work for, or the GER community. That conversation that we need to have. I think in southeast Queensland, we had that question before. People are the challenge. Our policy and our planning are unfortunately pushing us in a direction that's contrary to some of the targets that we have for caring for country, Keith, rather than NRM goals. But it's that challenge, and I wonder whether there's something that we need to do to just flip the whole matrix around. We're talking about our fighting for scraps, for competitive funding. The Queensland government recently had $250,000 for threatened species. Community grants, maximum of $25,000. I mean, that's not really going to... It's going to get some groups somewhere, but it's not a lot on the table. In terms of protecting natural values and everywhere there's nature, there's culture still left in those landscapes. How do we protect that? Can we flip the funding model around so that we're not fighting for scraps? Can we flip the funding model around that we can place, whether it's these new environmental accounts, values on properties that we say, that property has really got high values, whether it's good quality ag land and soil health with cultural values, ecological values. Therefore, that person's doing the right thing. How do we create a funding mechanism that rewards them for doing the right thing rather than give grants to the person who's been poorly managing their country and we've got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix an erosion issue on their land? So how do we help the people who are maintaining and for a public good? They're getting private benefit and joy and hopefully production values from it, but there's a public benefit. So changing the funding model around, whether it's some kind of, hopefully the environmental account system that recognises ecosystem integrity and condition, not just what's seen, from the aerial view of the world, and rewards people for protecting what's there. If we can come up with a mechanism that really encourages that, I think you'll see more and more private landholders going, I think what I've got is special. The community values it. The community will support me to keep those values in this landscape and take that little next step rather than rewarding my neighbour down the road. I think we'll see a transition in public response that generates a much greater outcome than what we're able to do. And it will just happen almost organically while people see that reward coming back to them for doing the right thing. I'm probably being a little idealistic here, but hey, let's hope, huh?
Let's do it. Let's try it. Quick one, Robin,
Yes.
as we're running out of time.
It was a great question, and I just going to say I'm a vet by training, so I'm not the person to ask. I solve problems with injections. The people we really need are the social scientists who understand people, and it's about identifying who people trust and respect. And in the farming community, that's farmers who have demonstrated good practice, and this is the right time. As fertiliser prices and other input costs go up, a lot of farmers are starting to ask questions. So this is the time to get the social scientists involved. Thanks.
So sadly, I have to say we need to wrap it up. Lots of good questions here. I think we have a way of capturing them. So we can go back, and if any of your questions were not addressed here, please go out to the particular panelist. And so let me just say thank you, everyone, for indulging with me, even as I was obliging me when I slowed down on keeping time. Last round to our panelists who did a fantastic job, and so thank you all. Yeah.